The wife returns with another man to honor, her late husband, only to witness a heart-wrenching scene. She never could have imagined that 10 years after her husband's death, Hachiko would still be waiting at the station entrance for his return. Looking at the aging Hachiko, there was nothing but sorrow in his eyes. Even his wife had emerged from the shadow of her husband's death and begun a new life, yet Hachiko remained in the same spot, silently waiting for his master to appear. In 10 years, even the most devoted lovers cannot guarantee their faithfulness, but this dog had achieved a lifetime of unwavering loyalty. The coffee vendor nearby couldn't help but shed tears. Perhaps only he knew what Hachiko had endured over these 10 years. Hachiko recognized his former mistress, but his eyes darted away nervously, afraid of missing any passenger emerging from the station. 10 years ago, Hachiko first met his master at this very station. Perhaps it was fate's arrangement that he blocked the path of the music professor returning home late from work. Fortunately, the professor was kind-hearted and knew that such a clean little dog couldn't be astray. Even after the last train departed, no owner came for the puppy. The professor approached the station management, hoping to leave the dog there until its owner came looking. However, the manager said they could only keep it for one night. If no one claimed it the next day, it would have to be sent to an animal shelter. Seeing the manager's reluctance, the professor had no choice but to secretly take the little dog home. Since his wife didn't want a dog, he settled the little fellow in the first-floor study, and his wife didn't notice anything unusual. As he went upstairs, he prayed the puppy would spend the night quietly. But the little dog was far from being as well-behaved as it appeared. Soon it managed to squeeze through a gap in the door and escape. Following the stairs, it made its way to the bedroom, interrupting the couple's intimate moment. The wife wasn't entirely opposed to dogs. They had owned one before, though it had once hurt her. The professor promised to send it away the next day, but asked if it could stay in the storage room for just one night. His wife reluctantly agreed. The professor arranged a small bed for it and, fearing it might feel lonely, brought a stuffed toy. After settling everything, he turned off the light to leave. Her husband and the dog playing happily together, his wife no longer insisted on sending the dog away. Before long, however, strange sounds came from the room. Hachiko had destroyed a craft piece that his wife had spent months creating. Unsurprisingly, they were thrown out of the house. That night, Hachiko was still locked in the storage room. It saw its master seemingly having a big argument with his wife. Hachiko realized it had probably done something wrong. Soon, out again, but as the sun was setting, he suddenly heard the train's whistle entering the station. Hachiko seemed to sense something, and with one leap, jumped out of the yard. It trotted all the way to the station, and sat on the flower bed by the entrance, waiting for its master to return from work. Just then, the professor emerged from that door behind. Seeing its master, Hachiko ran over and jumped right into his arms. The professor was delighted and hugged it happily. No one would refuse such an enthusiastic embrace from their dog after work. He thought his wife had brought Hachiko over, but the coffee vendor said it had come by itself. The next day, when the professor went to work, Hachiko followed again. After calling the dog back and about to close the door and leave, he saw Hachiko looking up at him with pitiful, pleading eyes. The professor felt somewhat helpless but ultimately softened and let it follow. From that day on, the professor had an escort on his commute. Hachiko was very well behaved, quietly leaving after seeing its master to the station, leaving behind envious passersby. In the afternoon, when the professor's return train arrived punctually, Hachiko would also arrive on time. Standing on the flower bed waiting for its master, it would spot its master in the crowd at first glance, and then excitedly rush into his arms, feeling Hachiko's sincere longing. Regardless of severe cold or scorching heat, wind, frost, rain, or snow, Hachiko would always arrive at the station flower bed precisely at 5 o'clock to wait. Gradually, everyone in the small town came to know him. Until this day, he greeted Hachiko as usual to go to work together, but Hachiko behaved unusually, backing away repeatedly, puzzling the professor. It wasn't until Hachiko watched its master's departing train that it seemed to sense something ominous. In the classroom, while the professor was lecturing to students, he suddenly felt unwell and collapsed to the ground the next second. Unexpectedly, the professor left this world forever. At 5 p.m., many people poured out of the station, but there was no sign of the master. Soon the station emptied, and still no professor emerged from behind the door. This was the first time Hachiko hadn't waited for its master. However, not knowing what had happened, it could only continue waiting. Until late at night, a beam of light shone on Hachiko's face. It was the son-in-law coming to the station to take him home. That night, Hachiko saw through the wall cracks that the house was filled with sorrow. The soft weeping of his wife and daughter foretold something. Intelligent Hachiko must have guessed. The next day, the family held a funeral for the professor. All relatives and friends were present to commemorate this beloved man, but Hachiko didn't come. As usual, he arrived at the station before 5 o'clock, sitting on the flower bed directly facing the entrance, waiting for his master to get off work. But the professor never appeared again. Until late at night, after the last train left the platform, Hachiko was still waiting on the flower bed. The train conductor, deeply moved by the scene, came to the flower bed to persuade Hachiko to leave. Eventually, the conductor left too. For Hachiko, the distance between life and death was incomprehensible. He only felt that since his master had left from here, he would surely return from here. Later, his wife moved away from this sad place. Hachiko was taken to live with his daughter and son-in-law's family. One day, taking advantage of the son-in-law's return from work, Hachiko suddenly rushed out of the house. No matter how the son-in-law called, it wouldn't turn back. Hachiko crossed through the snowy woods to that familiar railway track. Following the rails, he searched his way back to his original home based on memory, but strangers had long since moved in. Disappointed, Hachiko ran out of the house and returned to the station where he first met the professor. Once again, he sat down on the flower bed facing the main entrance. Soon after, his daughter and son-in-law found him. Held Hachiko and cried. Until that snowy evening, Hachiko finally saw his master emerge from the station. It quickly ran over and jumped into its master's arms. Together they went to a world where they would never be separated again.